Okay, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be tuning in with all of you. I wish that I could be there in person in Florida with so many of you this morning, but this is the second best opportunity to be here together online. I'm actually in Asheville, North Carolina, so about 11 hours away from many of you in Sarasota. So I am excited to be here with you today, and it, as much as anything, I'm excited to be able to take time to answer your direct questions. And I really encourage you to take this time to, if there's anything that you've been wanting to figure out in life of how you can live a more sustainable, equitable, just way, you have the opportunity to pick my brains a little bit. I see a comment from Elizabeth Moore. Very good to see you tuning in. So yeah, excited to be here with you all and excited to take your questions. I'm going to speak for about a half hour, and then we'll have about 15 minutes or so for questions. So yeah, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rob Greenfield, and I am basically a human being who's trying to use this life that I have to be a positive impact on the people, the other species, our plant and animal relatives, and this earth as a whole. And I've done a lot of sort of extreme projects that are really designed to catch people's attention, catch mainstream media's attention, and get the conversation going about really important issues. And I'm going to share some of those projects that I've done, a little bit about them, and why I do them, and a few stories. And I'm going to share today what you can do. This is, for me, my big thing is being the change that I wish to see in the world. And today in 2021, for me, that's being the change in sort of a crazy world that we live in. And so for me, I'm always taking that into account in my life and my activism. So some of the things you might know me for are, my year of growing and foraging all of the food that I ate while living in Florida. So no grocery stores, no restaurants, nothing packaged or processed, nothing shipped long distances. Even I had to harvest my salt and make my own oil down to every last ingredient. And the idea of that is that as a society, most of us are so disconnected from our food. So this was a way for me to immerse and connect in my food and take people along on this journey. You might have seen when I did a month of living like the average American in New York City, but I had to wear all of the trash that I created. I ate like the average person, I shopped like the average person, but every piece of trash that I created, I put onto my body. And the average person creates about 4.5 pounds of trash per day. So that adds up to 135 pounds a month. So why did I do that project? The idea is simple. We as individuals create a lot of garbage, about 1,600 pounds per year per person. And most of us, we never really have to think twice about it. It's in the garbage can, but we put it in the garbage can, and then it's out of sight, out of mind. So I wanted to create a visual that would really like shock people, where they would look at me and they would see what just a month of their trash looks like. And my activism is designed to be in people's faces, but not with telling anybody what to do. So how it worked is people would ask me, like, what are you doing? They'd see me in New York City covered in garbage, and I'd say, oh, I'm just living like the average American, but I'm wearing all of the trash that I create. And people would see that I was merely a reflection of them, that I was them, except I didn't have a garbage can like they do. I've also lived very simply and sustainably in a tiny house in Orlando, Florida. I built a tiny house out of 99% secondhand materials for about $1,300. Yeah, that's $1,300. So for a lot of people, less than a month's rent. I built my house. It was 10 feet by 10 feet, and I lived, very sustainably there. And then in San Diego, California, I lived in actually a smaller tiny house that was 50 square feet off the grid. So I harvested my own rainwater, harvested my own, sun to create the little bit of electricity that I needed. And the idea of this, well, we live in a time when house sizes in the United States have doubled over the last few decades, and material possessions have, gone through the roof. But we don't see a trend of people becoming, as we see these houses getting bigger and bigger, we don't see health and happiness getting bigger and bigger. And as a matter of fact, we've seen as this trend of more stuff comes and bigger houses, that health and happiness is actually decreasing for the first, it's hard to really put exact numbers on that, but it's pretty obvious to a lot of us that health and happiness, contentness, purpose and passion in our lives has been on the decrease as our houses are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We're becoming less connected as communities. We have more space, but we are empty in that space rather than filled with friendship, with community, and with passion. And so the idea of living in the tiny houses is to show people, look, you can be happy and healthy and a meaningful, contributing member of society without buying into the consumerism. You might have seen when I got my life down to 111 possessions, all of which fit into my backpack. That was in 2016, and I lived with that for 2 years. And then later, in 2019, I got my life down to just 44 possessions, and that includes everything. So a pair of underwear, socks. Now I will say a pair of socks counts as one item, not two, but down to every t-shirt, my passport, everything was down to just 44 items. And so again, the idea is it's shocking, and the idea is not that everybody can do that. The idea is not that everybody should do that by any means. A lot of people look at my life and they say, well, what if everybody did what you're doing? In a way where it's like trying to take it down and break it down. And the reality, well, actually, I'm going to save that. That's a little bit of a bigger picture thing. What if everybody lived this way? I'll come back to that. And if I forget, make sure to ask that in the questions. But the idea, again, of living so simply is about waking people up, because we live in a time of radical non-simplicity. Our lives are so complex and busy, and we have so little free time to even nurture our relationships and nurture our own bodies and nurture our communities. And so those are a handful of the different projects that I've done that many of you have probably seen. And I wanted to share those. And one of the things that I want to say is that these projects and my life is extreme in many ways. And the idea of today is not that you walk away from here feeling like you need to go to the same extremes that I do necessarily. Now, if that's your takeaway and that's what you're dedicated to and you want to, and do that, I am all for it. But that's not the message today. The message is, what can we do as individuals in our own lives, in our communities, in our schools, in our workplaces, to be the change that we wish to see in the world, to be a positive impact rather than a drain on this earth and the other species we share this earth with in our communities. So just keep that in mind. I do things that are really extreme, but don't lose me there. It's all about self-reflection. It's instead, my extremeness is designed to snap people out of things. It's designed to catch mainstream media's attention. It's designed to catch the average person's attention and be a wake-up call. And then start the education, be inspired, and start making one small change at a time to create the life that you really want to. So to go backwards a little bit though, a lot of people look at my life today and they kind of some people now that have joined my journey now and not at the beginning, they can often think, well, okay, he must have always been this way. He must have always cared about the environment and, had all the knowledge to live sustainably and so on. But the reality is that I was living a very average American life for most of my life. I grew up in northern Wisconsin in a small town of 8,000-ish people. And it was a very white, very Christian town, very much like there's a normal status quo. And it's very much in line with the American dream that you see in mainstream media of, wanting to have a nice house and a nice car and a normal nuclear family. And I grew up consuming mainstream media and mainstream TV, and just I was a product of the mainstream narrative of the United States in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. And I actually grew up very low income. It was my mom and us 4 kids with no dads that were really very supportive. We had help from my mom's sister and grandpa and dad, and also help from the government, but we were very much low income. And also, growing up Jewish, there was only 3 Jewish families there, and I basically was different. My mom was a hippie, and there weren't too many hippies around. And so I am sharing this because I grew up always feeling different from other people, and that drove a large portion of my earlier life, because what I strove for was to fit into the American dream, to be normal. That's what I wanted. And so that's where I was striving in my teens, my early 20s. But I didn't just want to be normal. I wanted to be better than normal, but within the normal context. So for example, I wanted to be a millionaire. That's normal. It's a normal American dream, but it's achieving a high level of that. And so I was very focused on money, material possessions, how I would be perceived by others, social status. This was very much a large focus of mine in my teens through my early 20s. And I was happy, actually. I went to school at University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, and then in 2011, when I was about 25, I moved out to San Diego, California. I started a marketing company. Within that first year, I was on my path to if I continued, to being a millionaire by the time I was 30, which was my goal. And I was living a good life. I was happy. I was exploring. I was excited. I had new experiences. I had great friends. I had what I needed. And then something happened, and I realized that actually I had to completely transform my life. And a lot of people expect, some sort of for me to go from that to this extreme life of activism and living simply and sustainably. They expect some sort of big moment, whether it's some sort of aha moment or moment of enlightenment. But for me, I actually didn't have any big moments. It was simply, I started to watch a lot of documentaries and read a lot of books. I started to educate myself, and I realized that almost every single one of my daily actions was causing destruction to the world. The food that I was eating, the car that I was driving, the gas that I was pumping into the car, the cheap stuff that I was buying at the big box stores, the garbage that I was creating, the money that I had in the bank, the money I had in my investments. Almost everything that I was doing was causing destruction to the world. And so ultimately, I realized I was a living hypocrite, because I didn't believe in destroying the world, of course. I was still a nature boy at heart. But I hadn't realized that nature boy at heart was the earth destroyer in my embodiment. I was not a friend of nature. as much as I thought I was. I was a nightmare to this earth, to people, to our many plant and animal relatives, to the ecosystems, and not just nearby, but because of my globalized, industrialized life, I was a nuisance to the world, like near and far. So I was 25 years old at the time, and I just said, well, I'm not doing this for another handful of decades. If I live to be 75, that's another 50 years. I'm not going to be a hypocrite for the next 50 years. I'm going to change my life. And that's what I decided to do. And what I decided to do was take it one step at a time. I was going to unravel the trappings, unravel the web that I had weaved myself into in mainstream American society and destruction. I was going to take that apart, like one little element of the web at a time, and then weave in a new way, a better way. And so I came up with about 100 changes that I wanted to make. And you can see those 100 changes at robgreenfield.org/100, just 100. That is actually a list of the first 100 plus changes that I made. And I also decided to document my changes. So if you go to robgreenfield.org/timeline, that's my timeline of transformation from drunk dude into dude making a difference, is what the blog is called. Because I had decided I was going to transform my life, and I was also going to document it and inspire others to do it as well. So what I did is I made this list of changes. I printed it out. I hung it up in my kitchen where I would be able to see it every day, but not just myself, not far from the front door where everybody walks in, where they'd be able to see it too, which would keep me accountable. I put my goals on paper, not just for myself, but for everybody to be able to see. So it kept me accountable, and it took people on the journey with me as I was going, which created community, which made it more enjoyable to do things together. And my goal was to just at least check off to make one positive change per week and be able to check that off, because I'm a visual goals oriented person. And so that's how I decided I was going to apply my skills in marketing and sales and study and all these skills that are fairly standard in mainstream society, but instead plug them into transforming my life for good. And so that's what I started doing, one change at a time. And I started small, from using reusable shopping bags, something that probably most everyone here is already doing, and ditching the plastic and paper bags. Started to, for example, look in my garbage can and see the ways that I was creating garbage. Paper towels. I ditched paper towels and instead got just simple reusable cotton rags and towels and then washed them. No garbage that way. I started to compost, all my food waste. No more food into the garbage can. Instead, I had a compost bin in my little back patio, and I was just living in an apartment with a patio, no lawn or anything like that. But I started to compost. I started to grow just a little bit of my own food, just experimenting with it. I stopped shopping at the big box stores like Walmart, and switched over to local retailers, and then even better, switched over to buying food from the local farmers market. I just questioned everything that I was buying and said, is there a way that I can just not have to buy these things? If it's disposable, is there a reusable long-term option? So I don't have to consistently be plugging into consumerism. Or, for example, if something broke, I would repair it rather than throwing it away. I learned how to make a lot of the things that I needed rather than have to buy them. I started to trade for things with my community rather than have to buy them. Another thing is I started to ride a bicycle more. I got a bicycle and I parked my car in my driveway and I started to just ride my bicycle a little bit more. I got rid of my gym membership, which saved me, a lot of money, and instead made nature my gym, connecting me more with the outdoor world, creating more of a love for it, and creating that connection rather than needing corporate places to just meet my basic needs. I looked at the things that I was putting on my body, the face wash, the shampoo, conditioner, the toothpaste, the deodorant. And I realized many of these were toxic and had toxic ingredients. And I said, okay, I'm not going to put these toxic ingredients on my body anymore. And I either just stopped using a lot of these things, or I found natural alternatives instead. And I don't just mean like greenwashing, I mean like actually natural alternatives to these things. So I was making lots of small changes. As you've heard, these are a lot of things that many of you have probably made some of these changes already. But I also was focused on my big picture. I had my small picture goals and I had my big picture ones. So for example, I had the idea of, could I actually get rid of my car completely and be just pedal powered? I was in San Diego, California, which some people might think California, public transportation, not San Diego. San Diego's got pretty poor public transportation. It's not a great bicycling city. So I had that question, is it possible to even live without a car? Not just because of the physical aspect of getting myself around, but also the social aspect. An adult without a car, like in my experience growing up in Wisconsin, a car was not only your physical means of getting around, it was not only your freedom, but it was also your social status, to the point where I grew up, if you saw an adult man, probably woman as well, but I feel like the connotation might have been stronger for a man, wearing like regular clothes, like jeans and a shirt, that you would assume the reason they were riding a bike is because they got a DUI or a DWI, driving while intoxicated, and that they were riding a bicycle because they had no other option. Not because they wanted to, but they wanted to drive a car, but they couldn't. So that was the social stigma that I was coming from. So I decided for 1 month just to park my car and not drive it and just bike and see how it goes. And sure enough, it was great. So I got rid of my car and I started to make much bigger changes as well. Divesting from, switching my money out of Chase Bank and to a local credit union, divesting from all of my investments at the time that had negative, implications. And actually for me, going as far as having no investments anymore financially, because my investment is in the future through putting all of my resources now into this world. So again, I started really small and was able to over time make much bigger changes. And after about 2 years, by making just one positive change per week, I had made over 100 positive changes. So within just a 2-year period, I had, transformed my life quite a bit. That is, imagine if you changed 100 things about your life overnight. That would be wild. Like you might be questioning like, wait, who am I? Where am I? What am I doing to change that many things? But by doing one a week for 2 years, it didn't necessarily feel super radical, but ultimately I had radically transformed my life in a fairly short period of time. Just in a 2-year period, I was, quite a different human being. And that path has continued, for 10 years of continuing to make changes and to wake up to more and more things. So after about 2 years, I realized I was still a hypocrite, a lot of ways that I was still causing destruction, but I went from being like that level 10 or 9 hypocrite down to maybe a level 5 hypocrite. And I said to myself, I think I can be a messenger. I think I can share this and inspire others, and not to tell other people what to do, but just to show another way as possible, because most people have to see it first before they can do it. And so I started to do activism, and my first activism campaign was a bike trip across the United States on a bicycle made out of bamboo, with the idea of having no negative environmental impact. And that was, for me, a pretty, big adventure. I was like living sustainability personally while living it out loud through this, 4,700 mile bike ride across the United States. So I was still a hypocrite, but I believed that I was a worthwhile messenger to be able to share a narrative, just show people that other ways are possible. And then, so that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. Is both, there's kind of two facets of my life. One is just my existence. I'm a big believer in a lot of what Gandhi's taught, and one of them is be the change you wish to see in the world. So my life is my message. My simple existence is my activism, just my existence. But then I have these extreme projects that are designed to really get into the media, get into people's minds, and create self-reflection. And so why do we need to self-reflect? I think that we live in a time when a lot of us aren't deeply fulfilled. We're not, extremely happy and healthy. And a lot of us, are dealing with great anxiety and stress over the world we live in and the life that we play. And so the purpose of all of this is to create self-reflection. It's to create the opportunity that allows people to ask, am I living the life that I want to be living? And if not, what is the life that I want to be living? And how can I do that? How can I move forward into that? And so I've created a lot of resources on my website, many videos, and the idea is to meet people where they are, to be able to provide these resources, to start where we are, to become the change that we wish to see in the world. And so a lot of people, I mentioned, they look at me and they see maybe where I've gotten to in the world of living sustainably. And sometimes they just say, well, I can't do that, so I'm not going to do anything. And I understand that. It's daunting. But I look at that and I say, that's like looking at a professional, athlete and saying, well, I can't be in the Olympics, so I'm just not even going to run. I'm not even going to move. But that's not the point. The point is we still can enjoy those sports and those hobbies, even if we're not excellent at them. And the same goes for living sustainably and becoming a person whose interactions with this earth are in harmony. We have to start a little bit at a time. That's learning how to dribble a basketball or throw a spiral or play those first few notes on a trumpet or a piano. It's a little bit. It's a practice that we have not been taught. We have not been taught these things by society. Unfortunately, this society that most of us grew up in was not one of, hey, let's teach people how to be excellent human beings who are living in harmony with this earth, all species, and will leave this place better than we found it. That is not the mainstream society of this nation we call the United States. So what I would say is, let some of that stress go. You can only be you. You can only be where you are in this moment, and you can only be in this moment. So embrace that. Embrace who you are, where you are, and this moment that you're in, and you have to start there. And my recommendation of starting is think about what are you excited about changing in your life? What are you excited about doing to be a positive part of your community and the world? And start there. Don't start with the things that are extremely daunting, that to you are just going to actually bring you down a level, that are going to be a constant resistance in your day. Instead, do the things that are going to excite you, that are going to create flow, that could potentially put you into a some people would call a flow state. And make these changes that are exciting and give you that momentum. And then when you've done that, it's going to give you momentum to do more. And that will give you momentum to do a little bit more. And that will give you momentum to do a little bit more. And that is what can get you into the state where you can become the change that you wish to see in the world. So my recommendation is, today, after the many different people that you're going to listen to and these great opportunities that you have for education and learning, while you're doing this, have a notepad out and start making a list of the changes that you want to make and the things that you want to do to improve your community. And at the end of the day, select to start with just a couple manageable, easy ones, the ones that you know you can do. Don't start with the one that says feed every food insecure person in your community. Maybe start with the one that says grow a little bit of herbs and share them with my community, because you can start that tomorrow. Start with the ones that are manageable, that are going to give you that momentum and make that one change. And just continue that forward day after day, week after week, month after year, month after month, year after year, until you become the change that you wish to see in the world. So I'm really happy to be able to share this time with you, and I'm really excited to be able to take some of your questions. I want to say there is no question that is obviously stupid. I remember 10 years ago having the most basic questions of what is sustainability. I see someone ask, what is greenwashing? That's a little bit more like upper level sustainability terminology. So don't be afraid to ask, any questions. And as my life is my message, and we're talking about being the change we wish to see in the world, any question is open, because sustainability is existence. The whole idea of, breaking it down to sustainability, I mean, everything we do is about sustainability. So it's about our entire existence. So I just want to say, like, any questions are open. Happy to hear them. And if there's a question that I today don't feel like answering, I'll just say that. But you can ask any questions that you have. So thank you to Sustainable Communities for putting this on, to all the good people who made this event happen. So appreciative. And I'm going to go ahead and answer some questions now. So first question is from Jeannie, I believe is how you would pronounce that. How do families do this? Are there good examples of families that have done so successfully? So it's a great question. What I'll say is that almost everything that I said is something that's applicable to families. Anything that creates garbage, finding a reusable alternative. Any way where our money is invested in fossil fuels and cigarettes and horrible destructive industries, taking it out of that, putting it in something better. Taking our money out of the banks, putting it into local credit unions. Volunteering at local nonprofits that are improving our communities. Starting a garden, growing food, foraging for our food from nature. Walking and biking more, and taking public transportation and driving the car less. All of these things, whether you're single or a family, are things that we can do. So, I am a messenger of, I am a single person with no kids, no wife, and I've designed my life that way. And so sometimes people get focused on that, and they see that and they say, okay, well, how do you do this as a family? Well, basically almost everything that I said applies to a family. And again, it's about adapting to our surroundings, to our environment. The key to the success of humanity, in my opinion, is diversity. Diversity of communities, cultures, species, diversity in the mind. And so we just have to simply look at our own scenario and say, how do we do this? And that's going to be different depending on the environment that you live in, your family size, how much money you have, your financial means, so many different things. Are there a lot of families living sustainably? Absolutely, because that's what families have done for 99.9% of humanity's existence. It was the norm up until a very recent period of time. And it's not what's covered in the mainstream media, but it is very much something there's so many families that are doing. If you just search Instagram or Facebook and YouTube and you type in sustainable family living, you will find a lot of it. And I do have a resource on my website. If you go to the blog and you click the category that is for families, I have numerous resources in there. And the other thing is there's numerous, like one YouTube channel I really like is called Exploring Alternatives, and another one is Happen Films. So those are a couple YouTube channels that have great examples of families. So there's so many out there. Okay, so next up, Erica. You spoke about us not having been taught how to live sustainably. I work with children often and would love some kind of crash course on sustainable practice for them. Any recommendation? Well, one thing that I'm excited about is I actually have a book coming out for like elementary through middle school. It's basically what I talked about today, but written for children. And there's actually going to be a little curriculum that goes along with that. That comes out April 20th. It's called Be the Change. You'll find that on my website under books. And I also have a second kids book coming out. That one's coming out January 18th, and that's Zero Waste Kids, and it's 35 activities to reduce, reuse, recycle. 100% of the proceeds that would go to me are donated to nonprofits. So I don't write this stuff to make money. I write it to get important information out there and help people like you, Erica, with education. So those are two great resources, but you don't have to wait till then. The great thing is that, I'm not going to use a brand name, but web browsers, typing it into the internet. If you just type in keywords like education for kids on sustainability in schools, you'll find curriculums. There's so many of those things out there. There's the Zero Waste Classroom. And actually, my Zero Waste Kids book is, there's 5 contributors, all women that are teachers. One runs a Zero Waste preschool. So if you check out that book, Zero Waste Kids, which is also on my website, then you can look at those 5 educators, and they're great. That's why I'm working with them. Frank says, did you have any digestive problems or improvements with your diet? I mean, for me, it was both the changing of the food that I was putting in my body, and then a big one was alcohol, but there was other things as well. But the amazing thing for me, the reason that I kept changing is because I was in a positive feedback cycle. I was feeling happier. I was feeling healthier, giving up alcohol, not being hung over. My digestion was functioning at a much higher level. Now, I've done a lot of different things that also can harm my digestion, like a month of living like the average American, eating fast food and so on when I was doing Trash Me. But during my year of growing and foraging all my food, during that year, I was in my best physical shape. My digestion, it was about 9 days of only eating nothing processed or packaged, only eating food from my garden or that I foraged. My digestion was the best that it had been in years. To me, some of the most important things for digestion are not consuming alcohol, or if you do, good quality alcohol in just healthy small quantities, whole unprocessed foods, and letting your food be your medicine rather than being dependent on pharmaceuticals and such. And then, of course, good sleep, exercise, stretching, healthy relationships, living a life with minimal stress and anxiety. All of these are really important things to strive for as well. Okay, Jennifer says, this is very inspiring and a great reminder of how we can all do more. When you are working with non-environmentalists, what have you found and want to do more? Okay, I see there's a lot of questions. Some is non-judgment, not judgment. Meet people where they are. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Don't tell people to be the change. Embody it. Be healthy. Be happy. Be an inspiration, and people may follow. I gave up on telling any particular person what to do, and instead I put out the resources in a joyful way to show people another way as possible, because there are millions of people stuck in the rat race who want out. They want out, but they don't want to suffer. They want something better. So show something better and do it in a non-judgmental way. Meet them where they are. Remember, you were probably doing the things at some point that you're telling you want people to stop doing now. Remember, you were that way at some point. And if you always remember that, that will help you to be a lot less judgmental and to meet people where they are. I think this answers the next question of how do you convey this message of living sustainably to someone who is uninterested in changing or doesn't believe their everyday actions are harmful to themselves and their environment. I think that largely answers it. But another thing that I'll say is, use your energy wisely. So I've decided that there are millions of people who want to change their lives, but they don't know how. They're ready, they're receptive. I spend my energy there because when I do that, that brings energy back to me. Seeing their positive, seeing that my life is of service to them, seeing that they are using it and putting it into action, that gives me more energy. It doesn't deplete my energy. It gives me more energy to be of higher service. But to focus on people that are not wanting to change, having to put 10 times more energy into one person and get less out of it, that depletes my energy, brings me down to a lower level. And that's me being strategically poorly using my energy, which we only have so much time and energy and resources. And so strategizing that is important. So for me, it was letting go of particular friends or family and having to dictate the way that they live, and instead putting my energy into the millions of people out there who want to change. Elizabeth, the ocean of plastic that greets us is in stores, leaves us in a quandary on how to get the product within, but not the plastic container. How do we get the manufacturers to take responsibility for the plastic container? Well, one way, of course, first and foremost, stop using it. Absolutely. Like, there are alternatives. Anybody who's watching this, there's an alternative. The truth, the reality of the situation is that most likely every single person watching this has enough privilege and resources to take those alternatives. They are out there. We have to put our minds to it. Now, if we're talking about people who are underprivileged, that don't have access to a lot of resources, that's a different story. But most of the people watching this probably do have the resources and the access. So take away the demand for sure is one of those things. But there is a lot more to it. I would recommend The Story of Stuff, and they have also the story of the story of bottled water. Their website, The Story of Stuff Project, is an incredible resource that would have information on that. Let's see. Ashley, in general, do you think sustainable practices could be considered privileged practices? Making changes can be more difficult for people who are faced with systemic challenges like struggling income, health issues, living in a racist society, immigration status, etc. These do affect our ability to think outside of ourselves. People are in survival mode. Do you start with that? Do you start with mindset, helping people to connect with themselves? How do you build a sustainable world while meeting people where they are? Absolutely. I woke up to my privilege about 5 years ago and realized that a lot of the content that I was creating was geared towards people who are privileged, who have access. And I've worked to unravel that and make my work accessible to people who don't have access to all of this, and who are dealing with other social stigmas, and who are dealing with, stresses, and who are dealing with, as Ashley said, just in some ways trying to survive. That's where, first and foremost, it's the job of the privileged folk to wake up and make sure that they're not living in a way that is racist, that is unjust, that's inequitable, and causing destruction and making life harder for people with less privilege, which is probably most of us on this conversation right now. That is our job, in my belief, for those of us that want to say we're living environmentally friendly by any means. It is our job to use our privilege to make sure, first and foremost, that we are not the ones that are making other people's lives harder, which is what we do through our globalized, industrialized lives. And it's not always the people right next door, but people around the world who are living with less. And then beyond that, we do need to absolutely change the systems. And there are a lot of, there's so many people that are working on changing the systems, including politicians, lawyers, community educators, activists. There's so many there's so many nonprofits and organizations out there to get involved with. If you go to my Instagram page and you look at the people I'm following, a lot of those are accounts. I follow a lot of accounts and people that are focused on change like that, and that we're about equity and justice. So let's see. I guess it is 10 o'clock. So I would love to have answered all of the questions. And I don't want to hold anything up, but I want to say that I'm so grateful for all of you being here today. And I'm excited to potentially hear how you use what you learned today to be the change you wish to see in the world. So I love you all very much. And I look forward to meeting you in the real world one of these days. And thank you to Sustainable Communities for putting this on and for having me as one of the speakers.